Branch go, whatever. Yes.
Executive, judicial, and legislative.
Yeah. So let's start with legislative, executive, and judicial. Real quick. Legislative branch. What do they do? Anybody know? What do we call these group of people? Well, that's part of it. What do we collectively? What do we call those 2,000? Starts with a C. Congress. Thank you. And in that is we've already said the House of Representatives. What's the other part?
Supreme Court.
Not yet. What's the other part? Starts with an S though.
You got it. There you go.
The Senate. So, the legislative branch, anybody know what they do with the law? What they do is they make the law. So, they make the law. Now, the executive branch. Who's the head of the executive branch? President. Thank you. Now, what does he or she, but so far he, do with the law? What they do, the president does, is they enforce the laws. So, Congress passes the law, we're going to print money. The president has to make sure that law is executed, that law is carried out. He has to make sure we have a plan in place to print money. The Congress says we're going to collect taxes. The president's job is to have a group that collects taxes. So, the president makes sure those laws get carried out. They enforce the laws. And the judicial branch, somebody's already said, what is that? Supreme Court. And other federal courts, but mainly the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court is in Washington, D.C. Anybody know how many people sit on the Supreme Court?
52?
No.
Oh,
Not that
no.
many.
No.
Oh, look.
Maybe I haven't tried that before.
Thank you for guessing. Thank you for participating.
There's only
Mr. Hensey.
there's 9 people on the Supreme Court. Now, checks and balances. How many of y'all have heard that phrase? Anybody? Rock for the game, rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors. Which is more powerful? Which move is more powerful? Rock.
Not really.
Yes, they all can balance each other. Everyone's got a power, but everyone can balance them out, right? So which of these branches is more powerful?
Executive.
None, because what can they do?
They can all counteract each other.
They can all counteract. They all balance each other out. And we're seeing right now one of the checks that the legislative branch has on the president, on the executive branch. What did the House do yesterday? They impeached the president. So that's a power the president has. The president can check the power of Congress by he's got what's called an executive order, which is the thing we won't get into. And he's also right now, and also has a thing called the veto. The president, if Congress passes a bill, it gets to the president's desk and he don't like it, he's got a big stamp on it that says veto. It doesn't become law. It doesn't become law. And anyway, it doesn't become law. Now, the Congress can go back and check that again by overriding that veto. It takes a 2/3 majority. That don't happen very often. Now, judicial branch can check these by declaring something unconstitutional. Congress passes a law, the president signs it. The Supreme Court looks at it because they interpret the law, and they say that's not right. We can't do that. Now, who picks the people that go on the Supreme Court? We just did that not long ago. Anybody know? The president does, and they have to be approved by the Senate and by the legislative branch. So, how long, when you're on the Supreme Court, how long is your term? Thank you. It's either till you retire or die. It's for life.
Touch this.
So, Donald Trump just appointed a woman to the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This woman who was kind of cartoon right here. She died. She was a Democrat. She was a Democratic appointee, a liberal judge. Trump, being a conservative, being a Republican, he picked a conservative judge to take her place. The woman he picked is relatively young. Now, y'all might not think this is young, but I do. She's not much older than me. She actually went to Rhodes. And where Miss Saban went to school. And but this woman is about 49. So she's young. Realistically, she could serve on the Supreme Court for 40 years. So Trump will be gone at 11:59 next Wednesday. He'll no longer be, Joe Biden takes the oath of office at noon on January 20th. But Trump's influence will stay on the Supreme Court because he's actually got this is his either second or third appointee on the Supreme Court. And it's all luck of the draw. If Ginsburg wouldn't have died, she would have retired she would have announced her retirement probably after January 20th because she knew Biden, who agrees with her more politically, would get to choose her replacement. So that's a pretty powerful role the president gets to take. Now, get to the Electoral College in a minute. Article 2 of the Constitution spells out how we elect our president. It's called the Electoral College. A lot of y'all heard that. Y'all heard that when we were having the election on, November 3rd. We have an election every 2 years. Not for how often do we have a presidential election? 4 years. But we have a congressional election every 2 years. The entire House runs for re-election every 2 years. They serve 2-year terms. A third of the Senate runs for re-election every 2 years because they serve 6-year terms in the Senate. So election day will always be the first Tuesday after the first Monday. That's kind of confusing. What that means, election day can be the 2nd of November, or it can be as late as the 8th of November. Election day will always follow in between those two numbers, in between the 2nd of November and 8th of November. This year it was the 3rd of November. So that's election day. That's in the Constitution. Now, Article 2 also talks about how we elect our president. I've made up this example, and I can't believe all the years I taught, and I never really used this example very much. We'll use a football game this time. We'll use a different sport, same principle though. Football game, first quarter, it's 14-7. Second quarter, 35-7. Third quarter is, let's say, 7-6. And the fourth quarter is 8-6. Now, in traditional football rules, who wins the game? Team 1 or team 2? Team 2 wins. They score more points. Now,
You thought it was gonna work like it did, then there we go, come on now.
yeah. So, in a traditional game, that's how team works. And look at this like we do popular votes. Candidate 1, candidate 2. We count up all these votes. Who got more votes? Candidate 2. Now, that's not the way we elect our president, though. We elect our president through the Electoral College. Instead of playing by quarter, playing by a total score, we're playing by who won what quarter. Which team won the most quarters? Team 1. So, in the Electoral College situation, team 1 wins. That's the way we elect our president. It is possible, it's not normal, but it's happened a few times in American history where the person that got the most votes did not become president. Why? Because they got more electoral votes. They won in the Electoral College. And we'll talk about that more in a second. Back in 2016, Hillary Clinton got more votes than Donald Trump. Why did he win, though? He won the Electoral College. Now, in the Electoral College, there are 538 electoral votes. Anybody know where that number comes from?
How many people are in the population of each state?
That relates to it. So, we talked about this.
You just say it.
Go.
Go a little bit.
What?
Of the Senate.
He's working it out.
The number of people in the Senate plus the number of people in what? House of Representatives. So, how many people are in the Senate? Anybody know? I'll give you a hint. There are 2 per state. So how many are there? 100. Every state has 2 senators. You know, Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, one of those states up there up north somewhere where not many people live, they're the smallest states population-wise. Anybody know our biggest state population-wise? California is our biggest state population-wise. Guess how many senators they have? 2. Everybody has 2. Now, How many people are in the House? Anybody know?
438.
What?
438.
No, actually there are 435. Remember that extra 3 here in a minute, okay? There are 435. 435. How do you determine how many representatives each state has? Exactly, by state's population. Anybody know how many Arkansas has?
2.
How many representatives Arkansas has? Anybody know?
2.
What?
4.
4. How many senators does Arkansas have? 2. Remember that here in a second. California, how many senators do they have?
53.
How many senators do they have? 2. How many representatives do they have? 53. So they have, so they're a bigger state. So you get the number of electoral votes each state has by adding the number of senators to the number of what? Representatives. So Arkansas has 4 representatives, 2 senators. How many electoral votes does Arkansas have? 6. California has, in fact, 55 electoral votes. Now, what is the smallest number of electoral votes any state can have?
3.
It's 3. So there we have a part of our country that gets 3 electoral votes that's not in a state. What is a part of our country that's a pretty important part of our country that's not in a state?
Hawaii?
No, Hawaii's a state. What?
It's not a state.
It's not a state.
Right here.
DC.
Washington, D.C. What does the D.C. stand for? The District of Columbia. Very good. Washington, D.C. What state is it in?
America.
Yes, trick question. It is not in a state. It is in the District of Columbia. It sits between Maryland to the north and Virginia to the south. But it's not in a state. So it is. So their license plates, and you'll learn this later this year, you'll learn this phrase later this year, their license plates say taxation without representation. They pay the same income tax that we do here in Arkansas, but they don't have a vote in Congress.
We're gonna learn that
Yeah.
as events quit happening in the world.
Yeah.
We keep going on hold because things keep happening.
But anyway, taxation without representation is on there. So Washington, D.C. gets no votes in Congress, but they're saying, hold up. They need some votes in the Electoral College. So they're going to give them how many? What's the minimum number? They're going to give them 3. So that's where you get the 538. Everybody see that now? 435 plus 100 plus 3. That's 538. Another number you saw a lot on November 3rd was this number right here, 270. What's the significance of that number compared to that number?
And then
That's
That is, but what's the significance of that number numerically compared to that, mathematically compared to 538?
that's more than half.
That's half plus what? 1. So that's more than half. That's a majority. So if both sides got 269, that's a what? That's a tie. That's a really, really complicated situation that I'm glad we didn't have to go through. It's been happened once in American history, I think. But anyway, 270 is what you had to get to. So that's the Electoral College. Everybody kind of get that? And most people don't understand it. Most of the world doesn't understand why we claim to be a democracy and the people vote, but why Americans don't directly choose their president. When I went and voted on November 3rd, I'm not telling you who I voted for, but I went and voted on November 3rd. When I voted for the candidate I voted for, I didn't vote directly for that candidate. I voted for a slate of electors. I voted for 6 people that were going to vote for this person. And on January 6th last week, when all the, pardon my expression, when all hell broke loose at Capitol Hill last week, when that happened, that's what their job was to do. Mike Pence, as Vice President of the United States, one of the few jobs he has, according to the Constitution, is to count those electoral votes that were voted on in December by the Electoral College. And he counts them. That's all he can do. He can't say, this is rigged, I'm not counting them, throwing them out. He can't do that, which he told President Trump rather nicely. President, I can't do that. The Constitution does not allow me to do that. I cannot do that. And Trump called him a really, really, really bad name because of that. But anyway, we won't get into that. But the senators are more than happy to object, but all the vice president can do is count. That's all he can do. He can't just make it up as he goes. It's written down in the Constitution. So anyway, that's what leads us to impeachment. The 25th Amendment is something else y'all heard about. Y'all hear about that on the news? Trying to invoke the 25th Amendment. The 25th Amendment is about presidential succession. There's also a little snippet on there that allows the president to be removed from office if he's crazy, in essence.
Unfit to run the country, I think.
Yes. Basically, when Richard Nixon was president, his vice president resigned. Who would become president? Who would become vice president?
Speaker.
Originally, there was nothing in the Constitution for that. There's kind of some stuff like that's a little different now. But what the 25th Amendment does, it allows the president to go pick another vice president to be approved by Congress, and he becomes vice president. Gerald Ford was his choice. So that's one thing. The second thing the 25th Amendment does is if I'm president of the United States and I'm having open heart surgery, and for 8 hours I'm going to be under anesthesia, can I be president of the United States if I'm under anesthesia? No. What it allows me to do is I'm going to sign the presidency over for my time in the hospital or time under anesthesia to my vice president, and they can run things for that 8 hours. Yes?
All my other questions are erased, so initially from the very beginning on that Wednesday when we watched this on Thursday, all these senators and congressmen were saying invoke the 25th, invoke how did they not know? Because it's never happened before. They didn't know that they could not do that was against the law.
They were trying to get Pence to do it.
I know, but that's what I was following all that C-SPAN. I wasn't doing the news, and they said that once they all got together with all the lawyers and everything, they said that legally he could not have done that. Did they not know that?
Well, what has to happen is in the Constitution, the vice president and a majority of the cabinet have to agree to it.
So they just agreed that it was
Yeah,
not.
Pence could have said, I'll do it, but it doesn't do anything unless he's got people like the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. He's got a majority of those cabinet members behind him. Because
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, I read that he literally sat and they all discussed and they came to the conclusion that it would be against the law. It would be against the Constitution if they even tried it.
well,
Is that
no,
because
I don't think that was ever said, because Vice President Pence came out and said he was not going to do that. For one thing, was Trump incapable of carrying out the duties of the office?
That's what
And their opinion was no.
Okay.
So he has to get Mike Pence and a majority of the people in the cabinet have to agree. This man's crazy. He don't need to be president anymore. And they didn't all agree to that. So there's nothing he can do. So impeachment came around. And impeachment is one of those checks the legislative branch has the executive branch. Now, what does the word impeach mean? What?
Give it to us, Ivy.
To remove the president.
It does not mean that. It does not mean to remove. That's a common misconception. To impeach just means to accuse. So, we have had 3 presidents in our history that have been impeached. Anybody know who they are? Who?
Andrew Jackson.
It's not Andrew Jackson. You're close though.
Andrew Johnson.
It's Andrew Johnson.
Yeah. Bill Clinton.
Bill Clinton.
Donald Trump.
And Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump, further in history, has the lone designation of the only president that's been impeached twice.
They can tell you why Bill Clinton got impeached.
And, Bill Clinton was impeached for lying under oath, basically, committing perjury. And then Andrew Johnson was just a really, really unpopular guy in a very bad time in American history. And ultimately, he wasn't carrying out his duties of his office because Andrew Johnson was the 17th president. Who was the 16th president? Abraham Lincoln. So how did Andrew Johnson become president?
One name and Lincoln died.
Exactly. Abraham Lincoln was shot and killed, and Andrew Johnson became president. Now, Andrew Johnson was vice president during the end of the Civil War. Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee. Why is that weird? Tennessee was a Confederate state. Tennessee stayed with the Confederacy. So after the war was over, he was a Southerner. He wanted the country just to get back together and not punish and just move on. And the North disagreed with him, and they butted heads constantly, and that's what led to impeachment. The House of Representatives impeaches the president. So they have the sole power of impeachment. A majority of the House has to vote to accuse the president. Now, if Drew is accused of a crime and he goes to court, who's going to decide his guilt or innocence? Not a judge, a jury. So this is kind of the way impeachment works. The House accuses, guess who serves as the jury? The Senate. So to convict the president and remove him from office, 67 or more senators have to say, yes, he did it. Has a president ever been removed from office? No. Andrew Johnson wasn't, Bill Clinton wasn't, Donald Trump wasn't. And here's the thing with Donald Trump. They can still go after him even though in a week he won't be president anymore. And what they're trying to do is make sure he can't run in 24. Honestly. But anyway, that's beside the point. Andrew Johnson, of course, it wasn't 100 senators at the time where we didn't have that many states back then. But Andrew Johnson came within one vote of being kicked out of office. He was really, really, really hated. Bill Clinton wasn't that hated by that many people, and Donald Trump wasn't hated by that many people to be kicked out of office. Andrew Johnson almost was. That tells you how unpopular he was. As unpopular as you think Trump is right now, Andrew Johnson was a whole lot more unpopular than that. So let that sink in. That's really hard to believe, but let that sink in a little bit.
I mean, I didn't mean it that way.
So this is well, regardless of what you believe about Donald Trump, you know there's a lot of people right now that don't like him. And like I said, this 67 right here is probably not going to work. Now, I won't give you my political opinions, but I will tell you this: if I were Joe Biden, I'd take the oath of office. So help me God. On January 20th at noon, I go to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, go to the Oval Office, sit at the resolute desk. My first act as president would be I would pardon Donald Trump and his entire family. And I would say this chapter of American history is closed. I'm not going to spend my 4 years as president that I worked hard to get thinking about this guy. It's my time now. Forget him. We're moving on. Now, I think that would be good for our country. Will he do that? No.
I think he will.
I hope he will. But there are people in his party that want to punish Donald Trump. Just like there are people in Donald Trump's party that would like to punish Democrats. It's the same way. And politics is a very, very nasty game. And understand this about being president. I say this a lot. Being president, a big part of being president of the United States is luck. Only about 20% is really skill. How lucky are you? Because there are things that happen to the president that are all about luck. It's not something necessarily they did, but how they're judged is how they dealt with that situation. For instance, Abraham Lincoln, probably the most unlucky president in American history. What happened? Well, before that, the most traumatic event in the history of our country, the Civil War. He didn't create that, but he had to deal with it. When George Bush was president, he had a hurricane hit New Orleans and mess it up. He didn't do that. And he had some nut jobs crash planes into the World Trade Center. He didn't do that either. And the Pentagon. He didn't do that either. But he had to deal with that. How you deal with those situations. Franklin Roosevelt didn't make the stock market crash, and he didn't make the Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, and the Germans invade Poland, and all the other kind of stuff that happened during World War II. But how you deal with those situations is how you're judged as president. So, who knows how Donald Trump long term? He's hated right now, but you never know how good or bad a president is until you sit back years later and look at what they did. Did they do some things? The most successful president in American history is a guy named James K. Polk. Probably none of y'all have ever heard much about him. Why he was successful? He was from Tennessee, as a matter of fact. He said, if you elect me as president, I'll only serve one term and I'll do 4 things. He got elected, he did all 4 things, and he didn't run again. That's the most successful president ever. But nobody remembers him because not a lot really happened. There was not a lot going on. Bill Clinton was a lucky president. Now, Obama, for the most part, was a lucky president. Not a lot was happening. Donald Trump has been unlucky. COVID-19 is what cost him the election. If it wouldn't have been for COVID-19, he would have won in a landslide. It wouldn't even been close because the economy was good. People vote with their pocketbooks more than they do with anything else. But we all know that didn't happen. And he took the situation, and true or not, he didn't deal with it the way people thought he should have. And it cost him the election. So, anyway, that's not really an opinion statement. That's pretty much factual. That's not saying whether he was right or wrong. It's just enough people thought he didn't deal with it right that they didn't vote for him. They voted for somebody else. So, anyway, anybody got any questions about the Electoral College or impeachment in general? Now, a little bit about social discourse. Me and Mr. Keniston, we talk on the stage a lot, and our political beliefs tend to differ. We're kind of on opposite sides of the aisle as it goes. But we have nice, great conversations down there, great friendly conversations. He's a nice man. You can be friends with somebody that you don't agree with. One of the great problems, I think great problems, but one of the huge problems we have in this country today and in this world today in general is people think just because you don't agree with me, you're wrong and you're a bad person. It's not the way that's not the way it is. Great example, I'll go back to this woman right here, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. She is a liberal. She was on the far left. One of her colleagues that died several years ago that was on the Supreme Court with her was named Antonin Scalia. He was on the far right. He was a very conservative judge. And they were at odds on the bench. They were on opposite sides of the political spectrum, if you will. But outside of the Supreme Court, guess what? They were the best of friends. They got little gifts for each other, and they were very close. They went to dinner. Their husbands and wives, they all got together and they went to dinner together, and they were good friends, even though they disagreed. Oh, the president story? Now, one of the great stories of American history, and the bad part about early on in American history is a lot of these men started off as great friends, and politics split them apart. That's what the musical Hamilton is all about. Is Alexander Hamilton's rise and his split with Aaron Burr and people like that. Two of our great founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, were like that. The first time in American history where there was a peaceful transfer of power from one political party to another was in 1800. In 1800, John Adams, our second president, ran for re-election against Thomas Jefferson. He lost. Thomas Jefferson was a different party. He moved on. And George Washington, by the way, hated political parties. George Washington was not a member of a political party. He hated them. He warned against political parties. And boom, look what happened with Jefferson and Adams. Jefferson and Adams were two men who were at one time very, very close friends, very good friends. But their political careers drove them apart where they were bitter enemies. And imagine, think of your best friend in the world and think about y'all have a falling out and y'all never talk again. And that's the way it was for Jefferson and Adams until the end of their lives. And at the end of their lives, they started writing letters to each other. And of course, this is no days. They couldn't travel really. Jefferson lived with his slave mistress, but anyway, that's an entirely different story for another day. But he lived at his plantation in Virginia. John Adams lived up in Massachusetts. A lot of distance between them, but they started writing letters to each other. And they rekindled that friendship, that just good debate they had. They got back together and became friends again through correspondence through the mail. And what is odd about this, on July 4th of 1826, which was the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, guess what both of them did that same day within minutes of each other? They both died. So these two people, the best of friends, falling out, got back together. They both died. And both of them, some of their last words were about the other, because they knew that they were going to be tied together forever in the history of this country because of their doing it. And I'll tell you this too, and I've told all the class the story. I'm a history nerd. My son probably, I think nowadays he kind of likes it too, and he and Miss Nolan taught him. He's an 11th grader at Westminster High School, and we've been to Disney World once and Disneyland in California once, but I'd rather go take him to historical sites and seeing the mouse or ride rides. So, I've been lucky enough to share with my son to go to Washington, D.C. How many of you people have been to Washington, D.C. in here? Please do this. Make sure when you have kids and you start a family, take them to Washington, D.C. Go see the Capitol building. You can actually walk in there pretty easy. That's why the whole thing about breach of the Capitol building is bad, but at the same time, the Capitol building is approachable. And understand the Capitol Police, they're not meant to handle crazy stuff like that. They're more or less glorified tour guides in a way, because most people there are there on vacation. They're there to see this stuff. And you can take tours of the Capitol building, do that. You can go see the Washington Monument. You can stand where Martin Luther King Jr. stood and gave the Have a Dream speech. You can stand at that very same spot. And that's cool.
You can't right now. It's been closed down since last March.
Oh, well, I think they're renovating it, cleaning it. But normally you can stand up there, as a matter of fact, I think there are footprints right there where Martin Luther King Jr. stood, and you can stand there. When we took Luke to New York, we took him to, we've been in New York too. When we took him to D.C., we went to D.C., then we went north to Gettysburg, where the Battle of Gettysburg happened. And then, I stood in the place where Abraham Lincoln said 7 years ago, our forefathers set forth upon this continent a new nation conceived of liberty, and so on and so forth, the Gettysburg Address. That was important to me. And then we went to Philadelphia. And Luke still makes fun of me when we walked into Independence Hall in Philadelphia, that room where the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution written, of the room where Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, George Washington, those people stood and debated. I cried in there. It was that emotional to me. One day, one of my dream trips is when I retire from teaching, I'm going to go walk where Jesus Christ walked. And I would imagine I'll really break down there when I'm walking, where he drug the cross up to Calvary. That's a pretty cool thing to be able to walk where Jesus walked. That's pretty cool. And when you grow up and travel, do that and learn from people. Be friends with people. And respect people. You don't have to like everybody you meet, but you can learn from them and you can respect them. The Bible, I'm a Christian, and I'm not forcing my beliefs on anybody. But as a Christian, the Bible says to love everybody. I try to. I fall short. I'm a degenerate sinner, like all Christians are. But I fall short of that. But I try to love everybody. Your parents are like that. Your parents love you every day, but there are times they don't like you. Everybody in here can think of a time where their parents didn't like them very much. Can't y'all? But they still loved you. I love Luke Martin every day of my life and every day of his life. But sometimes I don't like him. And that's why you got to learn to be with people. You got to learn to respect other people's opinions. You got to learn to be able to talk to people, and you can be friends and disagree. And you can be not friends, and disagree and be fine. You don't have to agree with everybody. You don't have to like everybody, but you got to respect everybody. And you got to give them their opinion. And understand, please don't let people tell you, oh, you can't have the Bible at school. Yeah. Have you ever bought a Bible school and had somebody take it from you? The only reason, if Miss Nolan says, open your history book, which you don't have one, but open your history book to chapter 3 and read that. If you read the Bible instead of doing that, she can take the Bible. Was she taking it because it's the Bible? No, why's she taking it? Yeah, she told you to read something else. If you want to read the Quran in here, nobody's going to keep you from doing that. Anybody know what the Quran is? That's basically the Bible, the Muslim Bible. Nobody's going to do that. I'm not saying go out and read it. Mr. Martin did not say that. Mr. Martin is saying
not pushing his religious
it's your right to do that. And if you want to pray before you eat, at lunch down there, I can't lead you in prayer, but if you want to say a prayer with your table and do that, nobody's going to stop you. I don't like, one of my pet peeves is people say, oh, they're taking God out of schools. I'm a Christian. Do I have the power, little bitty Mr. Martin, had the power to take God out of anywhere? No. As a Christian, how many of y'all go to church in here? A lot of y'all do. But as a man of faith that I am, not saying you should be, but a man of faith I am, I don't believe I have the power to take God out of anywhere. God's everywhere in my faith. So I can't take him out of anywhere. So learn your opinions, learn your beliefs. Be able to support them, and be able to have good conversations with people. You might learn something from them, and be able to be friends without having to agree with everything. You don't have to agree with everything. You can be friends with people that are, and sometimes you just can't talk about politics. And many times politics and religion, those are two subjects you can't talk about. Yes.
I have something to say about that, because I get so tired of people saying that. Because, like you're saying, I start every class every year with the same thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with each other, but you're gonna respect each other. And then, there's always, you can't talk about politics, you can't talk about religion, and we look at Mr. Tyler and go, that's history, that's all we have to talk about. Don't you feel like if we were raised where we could talk about politics?
Ideally,
Be sitting cohesively together
yes.
in a unified way?
In a perfect world, we could do that, but frankly, But
it's been ingrained in us not to talk.
But here's the thing you can do. That's part of growing up, is people that you can have those conversations with and have that civil conversation with. And sadly, that's not everybody.
I had a friend who went to the Capitol, and we were talking about it, and she literally told me to die. I have it in the text. She told me to die. And all I said was, I know that you have more sense than to,
But remember this today from Mr. Martin. When you grow up and you have children of your own, take them to Washington, D.C. and go visit that and go see that and go see those places where all these people that you're learning about.
Miss Saban and I'll take y'all to Washington. Hey, look. Wait a minute. Let me make sure this is on pause. Resume.